Are you looking to buy your primary home, but you're not entirely sure if it's the right move for you? In today's episode, we're going to talk about 3 key items that you should consider before you even move on to buying a house to decide whether that's truly the right move for you. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode at Nova Rice Invest. For those who are tuning in for the first time, this is your channel for real estate education. So today we're going to cover the topic of should you buy or should you rent, right? I know a lot of you have come across that dilemma and you're not entirely sure whether that's truly the right move for you. Yes, you probably heard your parents or some of your friends saying, yes, but if you buy a house or an apartment for you, ultimately it will be an asset and it will be your investment. But is it truly an asset? Is it truly going to be your investment? Or are you going to wind up being house poor if you choose to go down that route? So for that, what we're going to do is to dive straight into this tablet and let's talk about those 3 key points. So before we dive into any of those 3 key points, what I want to go over first with you is the concept of assets. So we have assets versus liabilities, right? So I'm sure you might have heard about it somewhere, but in essence, an asset that you have, it's something that pays by itself, right? Pays itself. So you don't really need to work for it. It's something that you can just leave there and it can just cover the debt. So let's say, for example, any rental that you have, right? So you purchase a home, you have a mortgage, but you know what? The rental income that you get out of it, it's going to cover the mortgage and a lot more. And eventually, hopefully, if you did it right, will also cash flow, right? But what is a liability? A liability is something that you have to work for. Why is that? It's just plain and simple. If you don't work, if you don't break a sweat, you won't be able to afford it. So let's say, for example, a car, right? So you purchase a car and you have your monthly quotas that you have to pay. The minute that you stop working or that you create any income, then you won't be able to afford that car. So those are the things that I truly want you to keep in mind. Now, let's dive into the 3 key things that you need to consider or that you should consider when it comes to buying your primary home. So one of them is your plans in life, right? So you have plans in life. Then the second one is the management of that property, right? So management property, we just abbreviate that. And then the third one, it's your finances, something that you truly need to consider your finance. So let's start here first, right? So if you have this property right here, if you rent it, then you'll basically be there for as long as the lease is good for, whether it's month to month or whether it's actually a 6-month deal or a 1-month deal. In a way, you can consider that to be no strings attached, right? If you don't like it, you can move on. If you like it, you will always have that flexibility to renew the lease, right? But in the event that you choose to buy, it's something that you need to consider about your future. What is it that you really want to do in life? So some say, well, I want to buy a house here because I envision myself living here forever. This is the neighborhood that I grew up in and I love it, and there's nothing that's going to happen or that could create me from moving away from this. This is my childhood town and I will be here until the day I die. If that's the case, then good for you. You have already made it through the test and you have passed the first step. But if you're not entirely sure, let's say, for example, you have a job that is very demanding. Sometimes you will need to travel back and forth from one place to another, or that maybe you could be stationed 2-3 years at a time in one place and then you will wind up in another. And the key question here is, should I buy a property if I'm in that kind of situation, right? So let's say you buy and in the end you have to move out, then you have to make a decision, right? So if you purchase, then you're gonna have to decide, okay, do I really wanna sell this property or do I want to continue to rent this property? So that way I will have one property in my portfolio or something to add to my retirement plan. So if you haven't thought about it, think about it twice, right? Because there are a lot of things that you're gonna have to take into consideration because they can be either time consuming or they can cost you a lot of money. If you decide to sell, then you're gonna have to deal with something that's called the 1031 exchange. And what exactly is a 1031 exchange? Well, I created an episode a couple of months ago, so for your benefit, I'm gonna leave the link down here below so you can actually check it out. But in essence, in summary, the 1031 exchange is a benefit that you get out of the US tax code that allows you to defer taxes pay on the gains of an asset that you sell, right? In this case, your asset will be the house, quote unquote. But if you do decide to rent, then you need to ask yourself, do I really have the time to deal with a rental? Because I'll have to, find a tenant. I'll have to, even if you don't deal with the tenant yourself, let's say you hire a property manager, you will still have to deal with the property manager. You will still have to manage the property manager. And there's so many other intricacies that you have to give into it. Then you're gonna have to probably cover some of the utilities, or you perhaps still have a mortgage to pay, and how does that impact you in the future if you want to buy again, if you still have a mortgage in place today, right? So those are all of the things that you should consider. That's the first thing. Now, the second thing to consider is property management. If you rent, it's fairly simple. If something breaks, all you gotta do is just to call your property manager or call the super, right? And it's a one-person, one-stop shop. That person will be doing everything for you, right? They will find somebody who can come and fix it. They'll do the diagnosis. All you gotta do is just to pick up the phone and call. So in terms of management, when you're renting, it's easy. But when you are a homeowner, then it becomes a little bit more complicated. So let's say, for example, if you're a homeowner in an apartment, so you have an apartment complex, and the process is pretty similar, right? Something breaks, all you gotta do is just to call the super and give you a diagnosis of what could happen or what's going on, and they can fix it for you. But then the cost of fixing it could come out of your pocket, or maybe not, depending on the type of apartment that you live in. If you live in a co-op, like there's a lot of those in New York, you will wind up not having to pay for the repairs. But if you live in a condo, then everything is gonna come out of your pocket. But let's say you live in a house, right? So in a house, everything becomes a lot more independent. So yes, you have your own space, but everything else is gonna fall on you. So let's say, for example, if something breaks around the house, you are going to have to be the person deciding or doing the diagnosis of what's going on. What exactly broke in this house? Some problems are very easy to fix, like, oh, the window broke, or the doorknob is not working, so I'll just, change it. But there's some other things that could be happening behind the walls that you don't know about. So not only don't you know about it, then you're going to have to deal with finding the right expert to come in to, one, do the diagnosis, and then hope that that same person that did the diagnosis for you can also fix it. But if that person doesn't know how to fix it, then they're gonna have to call somebody, and then you're gonna have to check references, finding out if that's truly the right person for you. So that's just part of the equation. It comes with the territory. The key question that you need to ask here is this the kind of responsibility that I can handle? Do I have time to do this? Perhaps you're a full-time worker, and perhaps over the weekend you also have a part-time gig because you're trying to save some more money to do other stuff. Let's say travel around the world, or maybe you are working and going to school at the same time. So do you even have time to worry about something like that when it can just be easily fixed with a rental, right? So that's the second thing to consider. Now, in terms of finances, that's where people make their decision or base their decision on the most. And it's fairly a simple thing to do, right? So let's say, for example, a couple of months ago, I also created an episode to sort of like show you guys my thinking process on how I decided to rent in New York City versus purchasing a place. So from that time until now, we actually wind up moving to a bigger place because now that there's two of us, we actually need more room to recording while the other person is performing other work-related activities, and we couldn't allow for the sound to keep interrupting us. So now each and one of us have our own space, and we decided to ump up the rent, and now the rent is $1,800, right, for a one-bedroom apartment in New York. Now, at the same time, probably about a month or two that we moved in, we actually found an apartment for sale, and the asking price was $550,000. Yes, like I said, properties in New York are pretty expensive. But my boyfriend and I looked into the numbers and we figured, you know what? We can actually afford to give a 40% as down payment and we can finance the remaining 60%. So 40% down is the equivalent of 220,000. So we're talking about 220,000. And we thought about it. We're like, wow, that's our lifetime of savings. And yes, if we use that $220,000 here, that means we won't be able to invest in other properties and continue to build our rental portfolio. So is this really something that will make sense for us, right? So the reason why I'm sharing this thinking process is just to walk you through what are the things that I take into consideration that always, one way after another, winds up getting me to the same spot, which is not to buy my primary home and use the money that I managed to set aside to either expand my real estate portfolio or expand my business. In this case, invest in our YouTube channel as well, which has managed to gain a lot of subscribers over time. So thank you very much for all of your support. But we're thinking 220,000, it's a lot of money. So the way we decided to go about this, and before I continue, do not forget to hit the like button right here below so you can help this channel rank and help other people like you who are looking for the same kind of information. So back to the slides right here. So we're talking about 220,000 right here. And when we did the math, right, if we were to finance 60% of it, our monthly mortgage payment would have been of $1,697, right? And because we live in a building apartment, you also have to worry about something that is called HOAs, which stands for Homeowners Association. And the HOA in this particular building was $1,010, which puts us on the $2,707 every month. So if you were to take $1,800 from here, and then compare that to $2,700, basically, we're paying an additional $900 a month. $900 a month, we could basically just use it for pretty much anything, right? And that's the concept of opportunity cost, right? Opportunity cost, and decide, okay, I have an additional $900 or maybe I'm investing $2,700. Do I want to use that money towards my primary residence, or do I want to continue to stay where I'm at, paying $1,800 a month, but then gain an additional $900 that I could be doing many things with? I could be, buying my groceries, paying for gas, investing in better equipment to get better videos, or maybe hiring an additional editor to help us out, or maybe an additional assistant that can help us get our thumbnails ready. And all of that stuff went through our minds. And not just that, we were really wondering if it was worth putting $220,000 towards a property that in this case is not an asset for us. Is not an asset for us because it's not paying on its own. We have to work in order to pay that. If we don't work, then we won't be able to create any income, and therefore it becomes a liability, just like I was showing you guys here and the right side of this primary equation. So what we decided to do was just to simply run some more new numbers, and what we wanted to do was just to simply ask the broker, and we said, okay, so assuming we pay $550,000 for this property and we lived here maybe 5 years or something like that. Let's say we want to maximize our time here, but maybe perhaps in 5 years we might want to move out of New York City. We'll probably get bored of it. Maybe we want to move to Thailand, or maybe go to Aruba, maybe go to Hawaii. Who knows, right? But we want to know that we have the option. So we asked them, if we were to rent this apartment out, how much can we get out of it? And he just simply said $2,400. So we said, okay, $2,400. So at $2,400 a month, because it was in a different area, it was a little closer than the hip area. At $2,400 a month, that's still not enough to cover the mortgage and the HOA fees every single month. So we will still have to come up with $300 out of our pocket. So that's something that I figure, you know what, I still don't like that. But if that's not enough to justify it, I did an extra layer of calculation. So let's say, for example, assuming that we were to stay in this current apartment for 5 years, that's the equivalent of 60 months. So when you do the math and you multiply $1,800 a month times 60 months, you will get a total of $108,000. So assuming we lived here for 5 years, we will only be paying $108,000 compared to the $220,000. That's like a lot of money we could be using towards something else. I know a lot of people typically say, well, if I'm putting $108,000, it's going away for nothing because it is not mine. But the way we chose to look at it is that $108,000, it's a service that we're paying for that will allow you, or that would allow us in this case, to stay more focused, so that way we don't have to worry about redecorating the place again to a new place or having to move our furniture. And with the extra money that we're saving by not purchasing that apartment, we can invest it in another rental property in another state where our purchasing power could be worth a lot more, and then create something that is truly an asset, like you will see here, because it will be paying on its own. Yes, we're eventually going to have a mortgage and everything, but you know what? The rental income is what's going to cover that. And let's assume, for those who are still skeptical and say, well, what if I want to live there for 10 years and not 5 years? It's very simple. So you take this, you multiply this by 2, and it will leave you at $216,000. Even if I were to live in this condo for 10 years, that will still be cheaper to rent than to buy a property, because by giving out 40% down, I'm paying a total of $220,000, and I still have another 60% of mortgage that I'm still responsible, and that's without even counting the interest, because the interests are coming out of my pocket and not necessarily from a rental income. So that's in essence how I did the analogy or the analysis that helped me once again make that decision as to, okay, what will be more beneficial for me. And I would love to hear if this analysis it's working out for you, and if eventually you decided to purchase or decided to not purchase, did you consider any of these factors? Did you consider maybe not buying because you weren't really sure if you were going to stay in a certain place a long time? Or is it because you just simply didn't want to deal with the management of properties and maybe you're not ready, you have other responsibilities? Or was it more because of your finances? I will definitely love to hear that. So let me know. Once again, do not forget to hit the like button if you haven't done so already. And while I still have you here, don't forget to check out this episode right here that's going to help you complement everything you just learned today in this episode. And until then, I will see you soon, and take care. Bye-bye.